Hi and welcome to a new episode of Trick or Treat, the Would You Rather game where you have to choose between two life-changing and highly unlikely or utterly impossible options, picking the one that's more beneficial or at least less damaging after thinking the hell out of them. So today we have to decide between always being too hot and always being too cold. So implied by the word too, we are clearly dealing here with one of those no-win situations. You know, a classic between a rock and a hard place kind of deal. Which means we've got to pick the lesser of two evils once again. It really all comes down to the meaning of the word too though. Too cold or too hot for what exactly? For surviving even for 1 second? Because if that's the case, then yeah, either way we are screwed, dead on arrival. That doesn't necessarily mean we should just pick randomly, though. That's not how the game works. Besides, in life, two options are never exactly equivalent, are they? They might both suck or both be great, but never to the same degree. If you think it through long enough, you'll always realize that one is at least a little bit better than the other, at least for you and for your life. Now, sure, you might end up being wrong about your choice in the end, but being right or wrong is not really the point of the game, is it? The point of the game is rather to get your brain cogs turning, to push yourself to think something through like your life depends on it. Alright, so let's get to it and examine the first option. Always be too hot. Can you protect yourself from being too hot? Not really, in my opinion. I mean, you can take off all your clothes, but once you hit bare skin, that's it, game over. You can't go past that. Now let's flip it. What about always being too cold? Can you defend yourself against that? Yep, you totally can, in my opinion. You can layer up, insulate, wrap yourself in blankets, or use any kind of heat source, a campfire, a heater, whatever. You might think the same applies to heat, though. Just crank the AC up to full blast, right? The problem is your body doesn't always agree with those sudden temperature changes, especially in one precise direction. Because you see, going from hot to cold is usually more problematic than going from cold to hot. It tends to hit harder. Going from excessive heat to cold air conditioning, for example, can mess you up. You might catch a cold or even get severely sick. And what about going outside where you can't really control the temperature? If you go with the too cold option, you can always pile on extra clothes. But if you choose the too hot, what you gonna do? Walk around naked and risk getting arrested for indecent exposure? The answer to that question, by the way, is no. And don't even think about it. Now, as a kind of closing thought, there is something that could throw a wrench in all of this. The word always. If it means you'll always feel too hot or too cold no matter what we do about it, then yeah, this whole debate is kind of pointless. But I think that's reading too much into it, and frankly, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It wouldn't make sense to assume, for example, that our body would cool down internally even more to make up for the extra layers we have put on to keep ourselves warm. That'd be too pessimistic, in my opinion. Although now that I think about it, on the opposite side of things, if you, say, try to cool down by soaking in ice water, your body might actually heat up, even develop a fever as it tries to compensate. But that's normal physiology. It happens all the time. That's why I said earlier that going from hot to cold is tougher on the body than going from cold to hot. So in a weird way, this last example actually proves my point even more. Now I'm even more convinced of the validity of my choice. So what's my final choice then? Well, maybe there's still more to say, there most surely is, but based on all this reasoning, it's pretty clear to me that being too cold is the smarter pick. And hey, let's be honest, being cold can actually lead to cozy situations, like sitting by the fireplace on Christmas night to keep warm. So that's a huge plus right there. So yeah, the final verdict for me is I click on always be too cold. And the audience chose always be too cold, 60% versus always be too hot, 40%. Okay, you can draw your own conclusions in the comments section below. Next dilemma, please. Hiccup every time you laugh, burp every time you cry. Interesting? Playful? We'll tackle that in the next video. So, but for now, I wish you a wonderful day and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.